Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see so many faces and attendees this morning on the webinar. We're excited to have you here. We feel like this is an exciting time for the South Carolina Fraunhofer USA Alliance. In particular, because after a couple of years of the Council on Competitiveness managing the partnership between the state and Fraunhofer USA here, we've been confirming demand for the kind of expertise and capabilities that Fraunhofer brings. And that confirmed demand over that short period of time has led to the relocation of Dr. Marcel Schäfer from the College Park, Maryland Center of Mid-Atlantic for Fraunhofer USA to South Carolina. So Marcel now has an office at the Council on Competitiveness in Columbia, and he's moved to Greenville, and we're excited to have him tell us a little bit more about the work that is being done within the Alliance here in South Carolina. But first we want to kick it off with a few questions just so that you can get to know him personally a little bit better. So Marcel, tell us about yourself. Tell us about your education and your career up till this point.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm kind of blown away that so many people are actually wanting to see and hear me talking about myself. So how many hours do we have? Well, about myself, my education, I have a master's degree in mathematics, or the German diploma from the University of Wuppertal, which is close to the city in Solingen where I grew up. During my studies already, I moved to Darmstadt and joined the center or the institute, Fraunhofer SIT, first as an intern, then as for my master thesis, and then as a full-time staffer. This was already in the beginning of 2009, so long time ago. And in January 2019, I joined the center Mid-Atlantic in Maryland. So I decided to take my wife and my little son, who was 2 years at that time, to just move to the States. I've always wanted to move to the States or live and work in the States. My sister lives here for 12 years or so, and I have been a couple of times here, so never in Maryland though. But we made this kind of big step from a very settled situation in Germany to the new adventure. And now again, we made this step last month, as Suzanne pointed out, to South Carolina, because it made sense. After beginning studying math, I have a PhD in computer science. Basically, it's cybersecurity, but there's no real cybersecurity degree, at least there wasn't at that time. I did this beside my work at Fraunhofer. Fraunhofer SIT. SIT stands for Secure Information Technology. So this is the institute in Germany that's all about cybersecurity, IT security. My field of research for my PhD and also before that was in media security. So basically it was digital watermarking and probabilistic codes. So it's kind of in the intersection between math and computer science or cybersecurity. I did some research in security privacy for big data. When this big data hype came up 5, 6, 7 years ago, then my old department did a lot in social media forensics. So this also, some of my projects back then were on this topic, and the latest of that kind was a huge project around darknet technologies, but not only the technologies, but also the psychological effects and social scientist perspective and legal perspective. So I had a research group around this topic before making this step to Maryland, joining the center. And a couple months after joining the center, this opportunity popped up where I was asked to support Dr. Adam Porter, our executive director, with all the work and activities that we have down here in South Carolina, support Suzanne in the efforts. And that kind of brought me to the point thinking about, hey, maybe it would be nice to be in South Carolina because it was always better to see the people in person, to see the factory, than just remotely. And then came COVID. So, which is actually another point to say, well, it might make sense to be here in the state.
So it's been an interesting journey, Marcel. We're obviously glad for all of the steps you had along the way, in particular your expertise in cyber and darknet and some of those things. Is that what you always wanted to do when you were growing up as a kid? You thought, I'm going to grow up to be a cybersecurity expert?
No. That popped up in a pub in Frankfurt, Germany, after one Christmas market visit, when I met my then supervisor at a table in this pub, and he was saying, hey, I'm working in Darmstadt for this Fraunhofer Institute, and in Germany everybody knows Fraunhofer. So I was like, oh, nice, maybe I can do an internship there. And that was actually the first contact with that topic. Before that, I was rather interested in, I was studying math, so a little bit in that direction. But before that, in school, I was more thinking of I'll do something with sports. So I actually registered for a sports scholarship at the biggest sports university in Germany, but there was a waiting list, so I had to wait a couple of semesters. And during that time, I wanted to still do something, so get some experiences in what studying is about, and studied math, kind of similar to sports. But because that was quite an effort and pretty hard, I decided to fight my way through this. And also the job opportunities for math were way better than for sports. So yeah, that kind of brought me around some corners to where I'm now.
Well, you can always sign up for American Ninja Warriors here now that you're here. It's never too late. But tell us about some of the what along this path within the Fraunhofer journey. Tell us about some of the, maybe one of the coolest projects that you've worked on, or what sticks out to you, and why was it meaningful?
So here's the thing, working with Fraunhofer, there's no one specific project that stands out. Like every kind of project stands out. When I'm thinking back of, I guess the biggest project that I worked on, that I acquired all by myself, was the one I was talking about, the darknet topic, where I had my own research team. But other cool projects in Fraunhofer USA, when I'm asked like, hey Marcel, what are you doing? What's your center doing? And I say, well, one thing that is pretty cool, sounds pretty cool, is, for example, this organ transportation via drones. Unfortunately, that was not me, so I was not part of that project, but it sounds pretty cool. In general, there's no boring project. So the project about facial recognition software, about learning management tools, so you can support high school students to the engineering field. So there's always something. Metagenomic assembly, where we improve tools for biologic research. So it's always something very spread out, always something different. And also the things we do here in South Carolina. Not every project is different. One specific example that's always really fun are these rapid innovation labs. So then you have been part of 2, I believe. So this is always pretty interesting, where we pull clients, employees, all from all hierarchies to the table, put in researchers from universities, from the local universities, and journal like 500 ideas, and over the course of the 2 days, save them down to 2 or 3, the most valuable ones. And then really, you can really see the people's engagement, like the company's employees' engagement into that, and really seeing them, hey, we are part of this solution. We were part of this. So that's always pretty cool. Again, generally speaking, Fraunhofer projects are always about something new, something that there's a reason why Fraunhofer is there. So it's always finding new ways of thinking, new design solutions, and then not only designing from the theoretical research, but then really seeing this thing go live.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one thing that kind of made me stay at Fraunhofer in the very beginning, was math, pure theoretical. In Germany, that is way more theoretical than in the States. And at Fraunhofer, I had the first time I realized that this thing called math has actually some reason in practice. So when I did these codes for watermarking, and the same holds for Fraunhofer in general. So you have something that is at some point you applied in practice, and that is just cool from my perspective, and I guess from everybody that's working for Fraunhofer.
I do really also like the Rapid Innovation Labs, having taken part in a couple of those. It is an amazing process that you lead the company through. So I agree with you. Those are cool and fun. And it is exciting to see, a senior management team pick up play money at the end of the day and buy some of the ideas that were developed during the course of those workshops. It's really, really cool. But let's talk about, now that you're here, tell us about your new role here.
My new role at here is kind of a natural transition of my old role, I would say. So officially, I'm Senior Program Coordinator for the South Carolina Fraunhofer USA Alliance program on the Fraunhofer side. I'm still a senior research scientist. What this means is I'm the first point of contact. Typically, it's speaking with you, speaking with Adam Porter, our director, or Peter Neal, our business developer, business director, to the clients, to the people that have a vision, have a problem, have a need, and have heard about Fraunhofer. So I'll continue to do this. I'm still the one you see probably at the very first, and then I'll probably be the one to scope out the project idea, put it into an application, and file it. And as a scientist, still, I will, for some of the projects, not all, because it's getting more and bigger, but for some of the projects, I'll still be with the company for the whole course of the project, managing those, and well, then seeing the result at the very end. Mm-hmm. So it's the whole span. But we, of course, my responsibility is to ensure that the world of Fraunhofer and the Alliance will, with this cash match funding, that we continue to support South Carolina companies, support the ecosystem here, to see that or to prove that there's a market case, a business case for Fraunhofer USA to grow. So I'm the first one here, but I shouldn't be the last. And of course, to ensure that the projects at the end are a success story from the perspective of the client. Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a little bit about Fraunhofer, and let's have you kind of introduce the organization a little bit and how the structure works for the audience, for those that are not familiar. I think we have a couple slides here. There we go.
And still people joining. Yeah, I mean, when speaking about the Alliance, probably start speaking about what is Fraunhofer in general. We see a map of all the locations, but maybe even more. Fraunhofer is a global organization, does applied research, and is a non-for-profit organization. It's based out of Germany, so the vast majority of these 28,000 research staff is located in Germany. As of last year, we had last year, 2019 and 2020, we had 3.1 billion of applied research expenditures. And as a globally acting, also Fraunhofer is applied research. And I want to explain a little bit what applied research means, because when you think of research, you typically think of the universities. Fraunhofer is not a university, but as the logo, or as the headline here says, turning research into products at the pace of business. So we want to do research, but we want to have it in practice. So when you compare universities, they have their theoretical research. I mean, they do things in practice, but much or too much maybe is still somewhere on the shelf or turned into a paper, but not more than that. And of course, they have the industry, the real world problems. And what Fraunhofer is really good at is kind of building the bridge between. And that is exactly what also we want to do with the Alliance. So bring this direct to research, connect the universities more closely to the actual companies that are in the state, and turn the research into products at the pace of business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mentioned Fraunhofer as a global organization, but there's Fraunhofer USA. So it's a US-based 501(c)(3) non-for-profit organization based in Michigan. You see the green spot in California there. This is, I believe, only one person that is there in order to license MP3 files. So if you haven't heard of Fraunhofer, you have heard of MP3, the compression format. This was invented, patented, and licensed by Fraunhofer. But the research is done in the centers in the Northeast. So we have Center Mid-Atlantic that covers coating diamonds, laser applications, and the headquarters there. Then we have the Center for Manufacturing Innovation that also covers energy innovation and sustainable energy systems around Boston. And we have the center that I'm originally from in Maryland and Delaware, covering molecular biotech and software engineering, artificial intelligence. And that's what we do. And well, as I'm now here speaking in front of you, I'm now in, as I mentioned, Greenville. So we are now also in South Carolina. So we have the Alliance, we have the office since last month. This office opened officially. Coincidentally, I moved the same time here, and I should not be the last.
That's right. Thank you. This is a good overview of some of those centers as well. And, you know, as this slide points out, the relationship between the Alliance allows us to be able to work with any of the centers that you just showed. So that, I think, is interesting for a lot of companies that do business in South Carolina.
Yes, it's these centers, and it's of course the whole Fraunhofer network that is behind. So there is no thing that there is not a Fraunhofer scientist really good at and doing exactly this.
Yeah, exactly. Marcel, tell us about the goals for the Alliance, just briefly.
So the goals for the Alliance is, of course, I mean, the Alliance is an effort of these three partners: the Council on Competitiveness, the Department of Commerce, and Fraunhofer USA, to boost the applied research in the state. There you can see the goal, of course, always is to improve the state. So the ecosystem, whether it's a company that benefits from this Alliance, whether it's the whole workforce in South Carolina, or the education. So it always is targeted at getting South Carolina better. And the way it works is you have Fraunhofer expertise, you have South Carolina research universities, typically it's Clemson or UFSC. And of course, the client in South Carolina, the company that has a vision, has a need, wants to invest into something, and with the Alliance has the probability to get a cash match of its investment and make a huge project with local universities, so local people, but also the expert from the whole Fraunhofer network. And the goal, and as I mentioned, is always for the better of the state.
Yeah, and one of the kind of newer elements is that you and I now are supported by people at Fraunhofer USA headquarters who can help us find the right individuals and the right groups and teams inside of this large Fraunhofer network. So that's helpful to us on a daily basis with 28,000 people around the globe to be able to hone in and exactly find the right teams is very good in way of support for us in the efforts that we have going on here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead.
No, as you can see here on the slide, the project team usually Fraunhofer, university partner, and the client. And there's this one-to-one cash match from Commerce in order to, well, double the size of the project budget. So this means if you have, as I mentioned, a vision, you have, let's say 100K that you want to invest into this, and you can of course go to some company and buy in, some consulting company maybe, or you can think of these alliance projects, work with Fraunhofer people, work with universities, and getting half of the money from the state. So there's 3 benefits as compared to just taking around with others, and these typically range from, as mentioned there, 50,000 to 400K. This is, but there's no limit. There's no ceiling. It can be more, it can be less. The project duration typically is less, or at most 12 months, because you want to be quick. It doesn't have to be 6 months. It can be quicker, depending on the scope, of course. As I mentioned, we want to be as quick as business. And the application is so easy. It's just maybe a 3-pager. It's on purpose easy, because you don't want to go into the typical research proposal that have 100 pages or so. That's probably not working in industry. But it is an easy online application. I will help, or we will help with this. This is no problem. And of course, the approval also needs to be quick if you want to be as quick as business or as in industry. So it typically is within 10 days, I would say. Yeah. And then, as I mentioned, we help form the project team. So if I know, okay, this is the scope of the topic, I will bring in the corresponding expert into the project team and help with application writing.
Yeah. And we do have a review board who are super engaged, and we've always said we would like for them to be as working at the pace of business, just like the applied research is. And we've made kind of an internal commitment that we will always turn around an application within 3 weeks. I think we've beat that every time. And we've been able to pull the review board together to look at new applications, which we take on an ongoing basis. I don't think it's ever taken more than 2 weeks for them to review one. So we're very fortunate to have that kind of support as well. So Marcel, you've touched a little bit on already, the kind of the vast capabilities, but just to really drive the point home, let's look at, what makes the Fraunhofer USA Alliance different from other centers. We've shown this already. If we go to the next slide, you can really see this is, well, go ahead. I mean,
right.
Vast doesn't really describe the.
Yeah, I'm not gonna read all of this, but as I mentioned before, the different centers have different expertise, and the difference, as you were asking, the alliance is it's very new, and it kind of this helps a lot because Fraunhofer is kind of restructuring. Fraunhofer USA 2.0, that's what we call it. So it's not center by center, but it's Fraunhofer USA, and we are very close connected now. And whenever I see something that is touching one of the centers that I'm more the software guy, but there's material and surfaces, and then of course I can just give a short call, send a short email, and pull in the corresponding expertise into whatever the people need. And that is a benefit for the alliance, that we're not tied to any specific one. You can get all of it if you want to, if you need to.
Mm-hmm. And at the same time, while we have this vast access to all of these kinds of capabilities, we have seen some trends on behalf of South Carolina companies in terms of the kinds of demand they have and for what kinds of expertise. Can you just touch on that briefly?
So naturally, as most of the projects were with the software side of it, it's basically South Carolina is very strong in manufacturing. And we are very strong in, like, the center I'm working for software AI and something like this. So what we see is a lot of data analytics, artificial intelligence, industry 4.0. So it's always, there's this real world manufacturing floor, and there's these new technologies on the digital piece of it. And it's always something digital that helps solving a problem, opening new business opportunities, or just improving the whole business, that we bring digital to real world. And this is certainly still a huge need in South Carolina for this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's been a very clear pattern, I think, that we've identified here. Tell us about what kinds of companies are eligible to apply for, you mentioned the matching funding earlier.
So the good thing is there's no 800 pages book that says if you're a company like that, you have to do this and then you're eligible like that. So what I like is that it's simply targeted at making South Carolina stronger. So if you are a company that is based in South Carolina and you grow with the course of the project, then of course you are eligible for this. But even if you're not a company that is based in South Carolina, if you have clients in South Carolina, and you can justify that this project would boost the economy in South Carolina, would benefit South Carolina or the workforce, then you still might be eligible. So the good thing is, if we can justify this taxpayer money that the state is putting onto the project budget is justified, and there's a return on investment that justifies this, then you're eligible. So there's no specific frame for this. I mean, now what you see on the slide here, of course, we had some business development targets. Of course, when you think of South Carolina, you think of automotive and aerospace, supply chains that we had projects, life sciences, it's also growing. We have not had technology companies on our list as of now, but we're talking to a couple, and I'm pretty confident that we can actually get one of those signed as well. And then you see German companies, not because I'm German, but because I mentioned earlier, I believe, in Germany, everybody knows Fraunhofer. So when it's saying, hey, I'm working for Fraunhofer, they go like, oh, it has a very high reputation. So these German companies that are in the state, like 220 something or so is the correct or the current number, they know, of course, Fraunhofer, so we don't need to explain the benefit in working with us. So these were the early targets for Fraunhofer project. And of course, what we're seeing in growing businesses in the next year, like agribusiness, smart infrastructure, and as I mentioned, the technologies, the tech companies in the state.
Yeah. And I know that we've had some conversations with companies where they might want to include in, say, a larger consortium of suppliers or something, companies, one or two companies out of a number that we would pull together in perhaps a consortium style model that were not located in the state. And we've been asked, could we still support that? And I think the answer will be that if it ultimately ends up benefiting a South Carolina company and there's a clear value to the organization doing business here, that we can entertain that as well. So we've said to people, we will try to be flexible about those kinds of models. Let's explore it, let's talk about it, and see if we can't work that out. Let's talk specifically about, we want to leave time for people to be able to ask questions, but I do just want to have you show us some of the projects that are currently either have been completed already or currently underway within the Alliance, just to give people a sense of, you know, it's a relatively broad scope, companies of all different shapes and sizes and so forth. Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, as you can see on the slide, on the left, you see the technical area. And when you just skim over it, you see that it's pretty broad already. It's basically topics like quality management, AI that are reflected here, Industry 4.0. And you see the companies they're working with. It goes from very small companies to the big ones. So we're kind of having the full spectrum here. And most of this is manufacturing, automotive. There's one in the life sciences. So you see the Nephron and on the bottom. What you can also see is the project team and that is interesting as well. So if you see, of course, Fraunhofer is one of the project, it's always one of the project team partners, but then you see University of South Carolina, you see Clemson, and you also see University of South Carolina and Clemson. So we managed to have Tigers and Gamecocks working together, which is a success by itself. We're also working with University of Francis Marion. We're working with Trident Tech College, and we're aiming for applying for broadening the scope of the technical colleges in general. And but these are the broad scope of the currently project underway. The two BMW ones on the bottom are currently starting. So these are big ones, and we're looking forward to this. We have something with Samsung is listed here, so we're also working with the Samsung plant in Newbury. And yeah, it's very broad. We have BCA, which is a Bicycle Corporation of America in Manning, so it's far off the big hubs of the Greenville area or Charleston area. And this is what Fraunhofer does. So it's not only the big ones, it's also supporting the smaller companies and kind of pushing them to the next level, if you will.
Yeah, we like that element of it as well. It's for all different sizes, rural, non-rural companies. That's been great about the Alliance. You know, we're really, South Carolina is diverse in its economy, both from a industry segment perspective, but also from its geography. So last question for me, and then we'll go to the participants. How can a company get started?
Well, call me. So if you, I mean, I mentioned earlier, the eligible requirements are not somewhere carved in stone, but really, if we can justify it for the better of the state. So, for example, you have a substantial business operation in South Carolina, your workforce or your clients are in South Carolina or somewhat along the line of the supply chain. Of course, you need to be able to push this 50% cash match to the project so that that commerce could add the other half. And of course, you want to work with us. And what we're not doing is something that where you can simply say, okay, you can buy this off the shelf anyways somewhere. So this is not a Fraunhofer project. So this needs to be some sort of specialty. And of course, what we want to have at the end is something that you can really measure the success. So expanded business operations, increased employment, upskilling of existing SC employee base. So if you can justify this and convince the board, the advisory board, that this project is fulfilling all these criteria, then you're eligible.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, let's open it up to questions from the attendees. We can either take those in the chat or Adrian, is there a way, should people just
Yeah, you can either just, I mean, I think at this point we can just unmute and take questions. If you have a question, just unmute yourself, or if you prefer, you can put it in the chat. And to answer Venkat's question, yes, we will send out a copy of the slides as well as a full recording of the webinar.
Great.
Yeah, I heard someone saying Happy Wednesday. I have not heard that term so far, but I usually say Happy Friday when it is Friday, but Happy Wednesday.
Marcel, this is Rusty Coleman. I have a quick question for you. So when you're looking at that 50% match, if you're doing some development work internal to your company, that's say like a $50,000 investment, and then the total investment would be $100,000. Do you have to actually put up dollar for dollar, or do you consider the cost of development within a company as part of the match?
So that is a good question. Hi, Rusty. this question comes up all the time. It is a cash match. So you will have to have this bucket of money put on the table, and this bucket of money that the cash match will be half of the money for that covers the cost of the Fraunhofer people and the university people. So what you as a company put on top of this in-kind work and self-development of your workers, that is in addition. So this is separate of this.
Thank you.
Yeah, this question comes up all the time. I guess would be nicer for the companies from company's perspective to be able to simply say, well, but no, this needs to be cash match, dollar for dollar. But you have to see it this way. Otherwise, you would have to buy in for, let's say, the 50K investment and buy something somewhere. I mean, you could develop yourself that costs money, or you could buy in something for 50K somewhere. But when working with Fraunhofer and in the alliance, you get 100K project, and this is then for the universities that are involved and for Fraunhofer people. And your work goes on top of this.
Thank you very much. That explains it.
Marcel, there's another question in the chat from Gary Powers. Can you give some examples of projects working within the manufacturing supply chain? I'm thinking about one that's just kicking off.
Yeah, one of the BMW projects are about supply chain. So the idea for this project is that, of course, BMW has, well, each car has like 35,000 pieces or so. So, of course, there's a huge supply chain all over the world. You have lots of things coming in, getting out of the factory all the time. And there are mostly people that are in charge for whenever something goes not the regular way. So there are planners that know all this. If they're there in the company for a couple of years, they do this really good. If they're pretty new, they're probably very slow in doing this. And the idea for the project is to have a software system that assists them, so that gathers all the data of different kinds of, also includes environmental data, traffic and border control, weather data, whatever, and kind of helps them creating this list of these are the next steps in order to still get the pieces to the car, because you don't want to have the assembly line down at some point, right? And yeah, this project's just kicking off. So we are in the contracting phase here. So, but this is very exciting, huge project. Or I believe this will have a huge impact. So I'm looking forward to that one.
Mm-hmm. But we do see there has been more interest just generally. I think Marcel and I have heard more and more companies asking us about supply chain. It seems that either there's a heightened sense of awareness now because of the pandemic about knowing and having more visibility into your supply chain than there has been before, but we will continue to see how that develops. We have a question from Pete O'Neill. Aside from the offerings from Fraunhofer's US-based centers, how do you identify technologies developed at the German institutes that could be applied to future projects?
When we work with the German institutes, it's, I mean, there are brothers, right? So we are brothers and sisters. So we do this in a pretty simple way of subcontracting with them. So you will still work with Fraunhofer USA, and we pull in and contract the people in Germany as our subcontractors, basically. And
I mentioned earlier, we have that great support now from Fraunhofer headquarters in the form of a person that is our kind of main go-to when we're looking for expertise out of Germany. So that's proven to be really, really helpful.
Yeah, in this, I touched it a little bit in this Fraunhofer 2.0, Fraunhofer USA 2.0 effort. more centered around, well, it's Fraunhofer USA, but then we have specific people that are in charge of building the bridge between the big pond. And we also have now one guy in Germany working for Fraunhofer USA that is specifically there to make the connections and to talk to the institutes. I mean, it's 72 institutes in Germany alone. And as I mentioned, the vast majority of the 28,000 people live and work there. So it's good to have somebody there in person as well. So this will be a fluent process in the future.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Crovey, did you have a question too?
Yes, thank you, Suzanne. Nice to hear the presentation, Marcel. My question was, in the past, there was some discussion around the possibility of creating technical matchups, conferences, I think it was called speed dating. Between the technology providers and the people who may need the technology. Is that still in the cards?
There's nothing specifically set up for this, but this is in our brain. So this is something that we want to do. Also, what we want to start off is something like a Fraunhofer workshop series, where we get people from Germany talking about specific research topics that are just emerging on a rolling basis, basically. And so we have a lot of different ideas of how to broaden the scope and how to do these matchmaking things.
Fantastic. Thank you. Look forward to it.
We have another question in the chat from Sylvia Judy. Nice to see you, Sylvia. What is the threshold for Fraunhofer Institute to engage in startups that are looking to get a foothold with their sustainable and gemeinnützigen products in South Carolina, thinking of mobility and sustainability, enhancing products that are dual purpose in assisting in visually impaired individuals starting at elementary school levels?
That's a long question. So in the alliance, of course, as I mentioned, the target is always for the better of South Carolina. Fraunhofer in general, investing in startup is complicated because we are a non-for-profit organization. We just can't invest as such into companies. What Fraunhofer does is when there's the business case, do startups spin-offs themselves. So, but I can't think of a way of how Fraunhofer could invest directly into a startup. Of course, there are ways of engaging, having a project under the alliance, or looking for other opportunities how to work together in order to get the benefit of working with Fraunhofer and some support. But a direct investment from Fraunhofer is not possible, not that I know of.
Marcel, I was just thinking about another thing. Dr. Kroby's question reminded me, we are working on the development of a workshop series so that we can, we'd like for it to be something that we would do virtually every month, where we can highlight some of the interesting things that are going on within the Fraunhofer network. Some of that might be things that are coming out of institutes in Germany or around the world that we think have relevance for South Carolina. So keep an eye out for that. All of you will be in our distribution list for those kinds of things as we get them started. So looking for other questions in the chat. Does anyone else have any questions you'd like to pose either in the chat or verbally?
If there are any questions that pop up at a later time, of course, feel free to shoot me an email or call me. I believe my contact information is somewhere available. will be made available somewhere.
Marcel, this is
Yeah.
Pete with Fraunhofer. I want to throw a softball at you. I'd heard last week just through listening in on a conversation about the Samsung project with regard to one of the executives mentioning, what this project means not only for, optimizing production and assembly and reducing defects and the like, but also the effect it's having on the workforce. Do you remember that quote? Because I think that's pretty telling.
Yeah.
People should hear that.
So that goes into the benefits when you work at Fraunhofer, or to yourself, to satisfaction of yourself. When you see or hear people saying like, hey, we had just regular workers here, but working with you at the end of the project, it's like transforming staff from employees to knowledge workers. So when the people are involved in the project the whole time, in the beginning they're kind of silent in the research discussions, because of course this is not their topic, but the further down the road of the project they get more and more involved, and at the end you can have a proper conversation with them, and this is certainly something that you would not get when you just buy something. So it's the engagement with the people in the clients, the close working together with them, that is something that is fun, and I guess it's highly beneficial for the company themselves and for the workers themselves, of course. Is that what you were referring to?
Yep, you got it. Thanks.
Okay, I can see that Adrian included our email addresses in the chat to everyone, mine and Marcel's. You can always reach out to either of us, and we're happy to answer any questions. If we didn't cover it today, you still have some things you'd like to discuss with us, please reach out. We're excited. There's so much interest in what we're doing in South Carolina. This is a very exciting initiative for the state. We're happy to be part of this, and I think if we don't have any more questions, we can give you 10 minutes of your morning back.
Well, thank you all. Thanks for your
Adrian?
interest in this. And yeah, if you have any questions, as I mentioned, just reach out. No formalities. I'm happy to answer those questions, and I hope you enjoyed something of the things I told you this morning.